What a great day to talk about a shitty romantic movie called Twilight.
I don't like these movies.
This movie franchise also starts sucking right away.
You know, it's not good. It looks like shit most of the time.
I didn't watch the Twilight movies until like kind of recently, and they are not good.
Every page was so bad that I thought there's no way this can get worse. And the next page was worse.
So these movies are a mess.
Stephenie Meyer, in my opinion, is a bad writer.
The worst love story in history.
It's bad and it's good and it's great and it sucks and it's funny but it's not and I like it but I don't.
It's not great. Admittedly flimsy source material.
They are made quite poorly.
Dumb cheese.
This shit's guilty as fuck, bitch.
I think it's stupid. It's messy garbage.
Let me be very clear. Twilight is bad.
Twilight's better than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In my last video, I threw every insult I could at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But the honest truth is, I don't think that it's bad. You know, I never even wanted to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I knew from the poster that I would not like that movie. And I was right. But it was so big and it had so much Oscar buzz. Podcasters I respected gushed over it. There was Manson family discourse in the air. It felt like the movie was everywhere. So on Christmas Day, me and my brother watched the film over 3 sittings because we purposefully started it when we knew we would not have the time to finish it. Surprising absolutely no one, we didn't like it. But not like in an interesting way. Apart from the final scenes, which I find kind of reprehensible, there just wasn't anything for us in the movie. Certainly nothing worth making a YouTube video about. But over the next couple of months, a few things happened that completely redefined my relationship to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and film criticism in general. Firstly, I watched a bunch of reviews and essays for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Lighthouse, another film I don't particularly care for. I know, I have terrible taste, but bear with me, I have a point. When I listened to these people talk about these films, it really struck me how overwhelmingly positive they were. As if these films were the only diamonds in a sea of coal, and that was the most obvious thing in the world. The reviews had a kind of universality to them that I didn't quite understand. At the same time, I was watching these same critics give mediocre reviews one after another for films like Charlie's Angels, Birds of Prey, and Frozen 2. And I get it. These are poppy, big-budget movies that are easy to criticize. But it felt like none of these people who were criticizing them actually understood what was special about these films in the first place. It was just so annoying to watch so many adult men who I know care nothing for the medium of animation offhandedly mention that Frozen looked good or that the songs were alright, while endlessly complaining about the plot and storytelling. And like, yeah, the writing of Frozen 2 could be improved. Watch Jenny Nicholson's video, it's amazing. But movies are a holistic experience, and the animation of Frozen 2 was kind of unmatched. There are multiple sequences that dropped my jaw to the ground, and the story didn't take away from that. But all of these critics that I followed turned the beauty, the spectacle, the brilliant use of negative space in the film. They took Idina Menzel's sheer power. They took all of the things that elevated this gorgeous film and turned them into one errant remark on a kids' movie that they did not particularly enjoy. But I'm digressing, because it wasn't just the critics. At this time, I also discovered the American Film Institute's Top 100 Movies list and noticed that there wasn't a single John Hughes movie on it. His films irrevocably changed the way we make teen movies. To be honest, I don't particularly like his films, but I know I wouldn't be the person that I am today without his work and influence, and the American Film Institute did not think that worth remembering. And things like that just kept happening. I would hear all of these different people on all of these different platforms continue to exalt films like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Lighthouse, while not even mentioning Queen and Slim, one of the best films I've ever seen. And the thing that really affected me about this perceived universality was that these are not universal films. They're just so specific and so particular. I remember thinking that if I walked into a room with 10 people in it and they all loved The Lighthouse, that would be a pretty weird room. Personally, I would leave that room. So why does it seem that this random group of weirdos are the most respected film critics in the world? Why do these people in particular get to decide what films are good and bad? And then I had a realization. The best kind of epiphany. The kind that I've always known intellectually, but hadn't quite felt in my bones. All of these critics, all of these podcasters, all of these AFI researchers, all of these Oscar voters, they were all the same person. They look the same. They think the same. They grew up in the same kinds of places. More importantly, they watch the same kinds of movies and have similar approaches to film analysis. They all highly respect a film canon and convention which historically has been made by and for a certain type of person. And then they become that person. And I didn't. I suddenly had the realization that certain people's values in art were worth more than others. I resented that. And to be clear, I am not trying to insult anyone's taste. Truly, I think that the reason so many of these people loved Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is because it's good. It is a pretty good movie. There is a lot to love. Not for me to love, but I think that there is a lot more value in someone who sees the beauty in a piece of art, explaining it, than there is in a loser like me endlessly complaining about a movie that simply isn't for him. But there are consequences in elevating some voices over others. Because, to be honest, even though I found the overwhelming praise that once got annoying, I didn't actually have a problem with it. It deserved the praise. I, of course, would have liked to have seen more self-reflection on the way that the movie portrays violence against women, but I didn't care enough to make a video about it. But a funny thing was happening around the time that I was having this revelation. We were smack dab in the middle of the Twilight Renaissance. Everybody wanted to watch Twilight. Everybody wanted to talk about it. It was intoxicating. New videos and content were constantly coming out, and they still are. But no matter the tone or perspective of all this new Twilight content, I felt one idea keep popping up again and again and again.
I am so sorry. I think reading the entire Twilight saga has actually made me significantly dumber.
They're bad, but there's a lot of stuff in them.
There's a lot of stuff in them. I like it. I think it's stupid, but I like it.
They're going to be bad, and I'm gonna love them.
Like Romeo and Juliet, except, you know, just awful.
I don't know if this movie is good representation of anything.
Now, does all of that make Twilight good? No.
This isn't a fantasy. It's a horror.
What's gross is being inspired by Twilight.
This is the definition of a guilty pleasure. I don't want my daughters anywhere near this.
But I don't think that it's a very positive film, and I wouldn't recommend it to any of my students.
I do believe that Twilight is a terrible franchise.
Yes, Twilight isn't, the Emily Bronte book
of, you know, our generation.
It's not the best series of movies ever.
Be good art! Stop not being good art! Twilight is bad. Or at the very least, not very good. The content varied wildly in topic and scope. Some wanted to apologize to Stephenie Meyers. Some wanted to provide a retrospective. Some wanted to give Twilight the fair review that it wasn't able to get when it came out. Some wanted to praise Twilight and explain why it was so beloved. And some people just weren't making content when it was popular to be mean to Twilight, and they want to make up for lost time. Regardless, it seemed like universally, everyone agreed that at least somewhat, Twilight was not good. Dumb cheese at best. And once I noticed this pattern, it was inescapable. Podcasts, video essays, comedy shows, real life friends, Twilight comes up more often than you think, and whenever it does, there is some reflexive need to add a negative connotation to it. I disagree. I know Twilight is kind of a masterpiece. And I think that's pretty self-evident. And I'm not going to try to prove that. That is not what this video is about. But what is this video about? Critics like Once Upon a Time and don't like Twilight. That's not a good reason to compare them. They aren't even very comparable. Twilight is a pop sensation and once is an Oscar darling. Star Wars would have been the better comparison. It's also a big franchise with fandom, and despite its many, many faults, it is an unquestioned critical darling. But I like Star Wars. I don't love it by any means, but I like what's good about it. And for the purposes of this video, I wanted to critique something that I could not find value in. That is why I made part red, because no matter what I say, no matter how boring, inaccessible, or offensive I find Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to be, the reason that I don't like it will always be just that I don't find value in it. There is absolutely nothing inside of it for me to enjoy. So watching it feels like being forced to watch a boring train wreck for nearly 3 hours with nothing better to do than to think of all the times I should have gotten off of the dang train. This metaphor is getting away from me. Am I on the train or watching the train? And it has always felt that most of the Twilight critics are in this same boat. Boat or train, I really gotta get this metaphor right. But the point is that most of them are just utterly incapable of seeing what is good and valuable about Twilight. And that's fair. We as humans are fundamentally limited beings. Not everyone can see the beauty in all things. But the thing that upsets me is that for some reason, most of the people who can see the beauty and wonder of Twilight and art like it agree that it's bad. Why? Why do we, as a society, talk about the arguably sexist themes of Twilight like it's the entire point of the story, but give a pass to Tarantino? Why do I begrudgingly acknowledge that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is kind of genius in concept and execution, while Twilight is not afforded that same kindness? Is it because they're right? Is it because films like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Lighthouse have an unmistakable goodness running through them that Twilight just doesn't? Is it because Twilight actually is just bad art? No, it's not. Don't be ridiculous. Twilight's a masterpiece. I know this in my bones. Leave a comment if you disagree, but this is the hill I die on. It has to be something else. I think it's because over time, we've begun to think about art backwards. Art came first and art moved us, and we desperately wanted to understand that movement. So we created canon and language and convention to describe and define good art. But somehow, that tricked us into thinking that we know what good art is. And if we know what good art is, then we certainly know what bad art is. And now that good and bad are knowable entities, we are confined to these definitions. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to explain why you like something that is bad? I see it all the time with my friends. I see them absolutely fall in love with something, and when I ask them why, they say, it's bad, I don't know. Or they'll call it trash, or they'll call it camp. And whatever they call it will never actually get closer to understanding why it moved them. It is hard to analyze something if you start off with the assumption that it is not good. I find it all kind of similar to the way that mages look for the root of Akasha in Fate. We all understand Fate lore, right? Oh my god, be less of a nerd.
See, Akasha is this metaphysical place that exists outside of time and dimensions that is the source of all events and all the souls in all timelines. This is important because the end goal of every mage in the Fate universe is to find a way to reach the root of Akasha. Basically, no one has real magic and they're trying to get to the root of Akasha so they can stop using the peasant dollar store magecraft shit.
In a very similar way, I think of good art as a metaphysical place wholly unto itself that humans strive to reach in any way that they can, but mostly through the medium of art. And one day someone did it. They found good art and that felt good, really good. And we wanted to do it again and again and again, so we studied it, and we did things that were similar, and we did things that were different, all in an attempt to recreate, subvert, and expand our paths to art. And in the end, we get something that looks like this. This is our canon on which our art language is based on. This is everything. This is what we learn when we go to film school, and it's beautiful, but it is flawed. You see, art has never been particularly cheap or easy to produce and distribute. It takes time, money, resources, and power to get to good art. Because of this, we have been fundamentally limited on who gets to make good art and what good art even gets to be seen. As a result, this canon of ours tends to skew heavily towards whoever is at the top of our hegemonic power structures. This canon has a reverence for the past and a fear of the future. And as mentioned before, we are constantly trying to expand our canon and add more ideas and voices, but expansion has its limits, and everything will always be judged by how well it fits in. And that is how our art language has become so fundamentally limited. And if I had to draw Twilight here, it will look something like this. It breaks convention. It resonates with the wrong people. Now, if this is your art language, this is nothing. It's garbage. It starts in the wrong place, goes in the wrong direction, and ends who knows where, but certainly not at good art. Good art is over here. We know this. We studied this. We figured out how to get there. We have an entire canon describing it. So this is nonsense. But here's the thing. In this metaphor, good art is a metaphysical force that exists outside of time and dimension. It can exist here and here, or really anywhere that we choose to look. The paths are limitless. And the thing about good art is that it is undeniable. We call so many things good or bad or whatever, but there is something in your soul that recognizes beauty.
Here's the thing about quality. It's absolute. It's inescapable. It's cold and uncaring, but in a beautiful way. Quality is quality is quality.
And that's also why the detractors don't just ignore it, but they have anger and vitriol because they can feel that there is something special there that they don't have access to. And that is why over a decade later, we can't stop talking about Twilight and becoming fascinated all over again in its text. And when we look at it this way, we can see that what we call good art has less to do with what is actually good and more to do with what we value. And our values are kind of arbitrary. There is no logical reason that we as a society hate all things girly. Jobu Tupaki could easily snap her fingers and go to a parallel world with inverted values where we hate all things boy for no reason. A world where Star Wars comes out and is a huge success because like Twilight it is undeniable. But every time someone brought it up, they only want to talk about how dumb and meaningless the Force is, or how the action scenes drag, or how Luke is an awful role model because he's whiny and has terrible plans. She could go to a world where Lindsay Ellis feels no need to make a 40-minute video defending Titanic, even though critically and commercially it could not be a bigger success. She could go to a world where we just like Twilight and Taylor Swift and we feel good about it. So why is this important? Why do I care? I like Twilight. I like Taylor Swift. I think there's something genius about them and I feel good about it. So why do I want the world to agree with me? Why do I want you to agree with me? Well, for one, I think it's morally good to call things that are beautiful, beautiful. But more than that, I think that there are consequences when we don't. When we see a path to beauty and call it ugly, we close off that path. We may get some more beautiful things, but we don't build a language and canon around it. Imagine how many more beautiful things would exist if we simply called Twilight good. And I can't prove that. Maybe the word would be the exact same, but I know that the first time they tried to write a script for Twilight, it was wrong. It had car chases and explosions and just generally mangled the source material into something not good. I know that mid-production they had to cut their budget. I know that from the ground up it was nearly impossible to get Twilight made, even though the book was wildly successful and it had fan support from day one. And when I hear the way that people talk about Twilight today, what did we learn? Twilight is not a one-off fluke. Or at least it doesn't have to be. All I know is that every time I hear somebody compare something to Twilight, it is in an unfavorable light. And how can we possibly get the next masterpiece if this is how we talk about it? We have burned a path to beauty and left the world colder. So I made this series of videos. And I mean-spiritedly complained about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, not because I want to convince anyone that it's a bad movie, but to show that we don't live in an objective, critical world. Because some of my problems with that film are petty and some are incredibly valid, but if every critic in the world had my exact same opinion about the film, I would still prefer to listen to the people who actually knew the value of it. We are all shaped by our values, and for too long our culture has been overvaluing some opinions and undervaluing others. And please, by all means, I do hope that we continue to overvalue the visions of angry white men. They make good art. I just want us to learn to value more visions, especially ones that center women and minorities and kindness and romance, and not just in agreeable ways, but weird, off-putting, and subversive ones. Because it's not just Twilight. There are entire words, books, and poetry and music that I love that have been improperly maligned as bad for years. All for the sin of being too girly or not appealing to the right audience. When I wrote this script, I was afraid that I would come off as white knighty, as a man trying to save women's media, but I promise you that I am being as selfish as I can be, because I just want the things that I love to get the respect that they deserve. Because I like a lot of things. And when Everything Everywhere All at Once is my favorite film of the year, it wins Best Picture. And when Do Revenge is my second favorite, I just hear people say that it's not Mean Girls. As if Mean Girls didn't receive middling reviews when it came out. There is a very important subsection of my interests and personality that seems to never match up with artistic critical consensus. And call it girly, call it feminine, it's mine. It is a part of me and I love it. And I know that it is good. And I want it to be respected. And I think that starts with calling Twilight good. So what do I want? What do I hope to accomplish? What is my vision for the perfect word? Right after the release of Taylor Swift's record-destroying album Midnights, John Green tweeted something I particularly liked. Taylor Swift's music is such a gift to the world, and the way she fosters community is so brilliant. And I love Midnights, and everyone should be able to love what and whom they love earnestly and without irony or cynicism or apology. I want that too. I want to see the things that I love celebrated and respected. And it's not about negating negative voices and opinions. Those voices matter and are important. It's more about amplifying the voices of the people who understand and appreciate a text. I think that if we did that, then we will be closer to a world where we are not apologizing to a new woman every few months. A world where we realize that Jennifer's body is beautiful and subversive on the first go instead of a decade later. While we're on the subject, I am sorry, Olivia Wilde. While there are definite reasons to critique you and your movie, neither received the respect or reception that they deserve. I hope to make a video about it someday. Mostly, I just want our systems of film criticism and discussion to be a wider and more diverse space. And for me, that means making room for people who recognize Twilight's genius. And I don't know what that looks like, but I imagine a world where whenever I look up the most iconic and influential genre-defining masterpieces of my childhood, they get more than bad to middling reviews on the top sites. High School Musical is the most important text of our generation, and Kenny Ortega deserves several Oscars. I don't know how to make that happen, but I do have a suggestion that might move us closer to that future. we stop calling the things we like bad. I know that it is fun to describe ourselves as garbage people who like to consume trash, but I don't think that is true. I think that there is more beauty in this world than what we give credit to. We have souls that strive and long for beauty, and if something moves us, then that is meaningful. So if you like something, if it communes with you, if you have a transcendent art experience with a piece of media, but everything you know about art language won't allow you to call it good, then doubt your art language. Don't doubt yourself. Remember, we created canon and convention and art language to make sense of what we find beautiful. So when it stops doing that, abandon it. Make something new. I want to take Riverdale as a case study because I see people talk about it in a similar way that I see them talk about Twilight. Personally, I love Riverdale. I think it's one of the best shows on TV. It is beautiful and wildly subversive with familiar and rich characters that live in my heart. But that is not how people talk about Riverdale. They talk about it like it's the bane of our society. Everything wrong with our generation. It's not just bad, but potentially hurtful to our way of life. And if you think that, I am not here to change your mind. I disagree, but I'm not going to debate you. I want to talk to the people who like the show. I am making this video for them. This is a random tweet that kind of upset me. This tweet is kind of representative of a lot of the positive opinions and defenses that I see of things like Riverdale and Twilight. My friend, my brother in quiet mercy. If you want to say that Riverdale blends bombast with self-awareness in a way that transcends camp in order to create art so thoughtfully escapist it might actually be genius, you can just say that. If you believe that Riverdale is genius, there is no reason to call it bad, because I promise you, the objective of Riverdale is not to be bad. In fact, I think all the creatives who work on the show try really hard to make it good so that people like you and me will enjoy it. So that anyone out there who feels the need to apologize for or denigrate the things you enjoy before complimenting them, I sincerely hope that one day you are disavowed of that notion. But I'm not here to pick on some random tweet that I saw one time. I'm here to pick on Super Eye Patch Wolf. That's right, John, I'm coming for you. John Walsh is an Irish YouTuber who, under the name Super Eye Patch Wolf, makes video essays that I very much enjoy. A bit over a year ago, he made a video called Riverdale, the show that went completely insane. That is one of my favorite Riverdale videos on this platform. John really gets the manic energy of the show, but also, I would be enamored with really any video that just lists the events of Season 3 of Riverdale. It's just so good. It's so gorgeous. But back to Super Eye Patch Wolf.
See, I've developed a unhealthy obsession with this show. I am fascinated by it. Fascinated as to how a show that started as a very normal teen drama could morph into one of the most bizarre and ridiculed shows on television. And to ask, is there value in that? Oh god, I think there might be.
Spoiler alert, he does think that Riverdale has value, but importantly to the context of my video, he only thinks that Riverdale has value because it is bad. I'll let him say it.
And if we were to chart my taste in media, it would follow this curve right here. At the highest end of both quality and enjoyment, we would have something legitimately great like Cowboy Bebop. But on the opposite end, we would have something like the infamously terrible film, The Room. But then there's this section in the middle right here. And this is the dreaded mediocre valley. And it's here where I would place season 1 of Riverdale, a series that simultaneously has nothing to say while never being brave enough to be terrible.
Now, immediately, I do not take much offense to this. It is a nice and fun graphic, and I have no great love for season 1 of Riverdale. I don't agree with all of his points, but generally, he's right. It is mediocre and has little to say. But I do think that this way of comparing quality to enjoyment is entirely too limiting. I think as an idea, it's a pretty good way of describing why we might like something like The Room, but from inception, this concept could only ever push Riverdale closer to The Room. But the two could not be more dissimilar. Unlike The Room, Riverdale looks good and has a very talented and meticulous creative team behind it. The show is not inadvertently good. The people who enjoy it tend to see what the creators are going for and happen to find whatever that is interesting or cool. But Super OUaTiH Wolf has created a false dichotomy where the better that the show gets at leaning into the things that he finds enjoyable, the worse the quality of the show must be. Here is how he describes a particularly enjoyable moment in season 3.
It might be the Chaos Goblin in my brain, but I kind of love this moment. It's such an insane and fun way of revealing how much of this town has been taken over by this creepy fucking cult. And sure, it's schlocky and garbage, but this right here, this is gourmet garbage. And do you feel that? Do you feel us rising out of the mediocre valley?
Why is it schlocky garbage, John? It's fun. It advances the narrative in an interesting way. You clearly love it. How is the exciting conclusion to this insanely well-made, produced, and choreographed musical episode indicative of the quality going down? After that, John spends a good bit just listing a bunch of the bafflingly bizarre events of season 3. And it is just glorious.
Some of the car crash moments this story leads to are just so good.
And you know, it really feels like he gets it, like he sees what I see.
This is the moment I became convinced I was not laughing at Riverdale, but with it.
Yes, John, yes, we are laughing together. It was all perfectly crafted to get us to this moment.
Sorry, but if you genuinely believe that little Archie Andrews getting stage fright while playing his guitar is more entertaining than the leader of an organ harvesting cult building his own space rocket to escape the FBI while dressed like this, then you are not fun at parties and I don't want to hang out with you.
Well, John, by that logic, I am fun at parties and would love to hang out. But I think we have a fundamental disagreement. Because I don't think Riverdale is just entertaining. And you say that these over-the-top moments wouldn't be possible in a show more technically competent?
And I do think there's something kind of compelling about the audacity that comes with narratives focused on creating insane moments like this that just aren't possible with more technically competent storytelling.
But I disagree. If it were that simple, everyone would be doing it. I think that it takes a lot of skill and a little bit of magic to create a world that can contain all of the spectacle and majesty of Riverdale. But he's constructed a world where every mechanism that allows Riverdale to soar further into its extraordinary beauty must be inherently bad. He then goes on to explain how season 4 kind of sucks.
But unfortunately, season 4 is also where Riverdale's writing sins really start to catch up with it.
And I low-key agree. A lot of season 4 is uninteresting. But if I go by the logic presented in the video, since enjoyment is decreasing, the quality must be improving. And that doesn't make sense to me. Is the reason that these episodes are kind of boring compared to others because the writers suddenly aspired to new levels of talent? Is Kevin's dumb underground tickle fighting ring just materially more sophisticated than Archie's beautiful boy jail fighting ring? I don't know, but according to this chart, the quality must be empirically better on some level. Personally, for me, I just think the parts that were enjoyable are better. But that's not the word that John has created. This is how he ends the video.
It's because I like it. I really like Riverdale. For me, the value of a piece of media isn't dictated by what it does badly, but by what it does well. And with Riverdale, sometimes I don't need a deep dive into the human condition or to be confronted with the existentialism of my own mortality. Sometimes I just need to sit on my couch with my partner, eat bad takeout, and laugh and howl as life's ills fall away in the blazing spectacle of a show that has completely lost its mind. There's a chaotic beauty to bad media, and rather than something succeed in mediocrity, I prefer to see it fail spectacularly. And that's what I think Riverdale does.
He likes the show and doesn't think that media should be judged by what it does badly, but rather what it does well. But every single thing he likes about Riverdale, he has made clear that he thinks is inherently bad or of low quality. And if a deep dive into the human condition or being confronted with the existentialism of his own mortality is his definition of good art, then that's fine. But I think that that is such a limiting perspective on the nature of beauty. And normally, I would say that maybe we're just having a misunderstanding of language, and his definition of high and low quality don't necessarily correlate to good and bad, and I just try to enjoy his analysis. It is enjoyable. But then he calls my favorite show a failure.
Fail spectacularly.
And that's what he leaves us with. He liked it. He thinks it's spectacular, but ultimately it is a failure. You know, Riverdale is an exceedingly easy show to make fun of. And you should make fun of it. It's fun, but it's not a failure. And that is why I'm spending so much of my time talking about some random Riverdale video in what was promised to be a Twilight versus Once Upon a Time in Hollywood discussion. When I heard that line, it just felt like the perfect microcosm of all the things I have been talking about, of what is and isn't allowed to be called good art. Look, if you have experienced the triumphs and defeats, the epic highs and lows of Riverdale, and come away thinking that is trash, is garbage, is bad art, a spectacular failure, then that's fair. That is your take, and I will not try to change your mind, but please do not feel the need to defend the show. If you think it is bad, please do not try to tell me what value it holds. Because every time I hear someone say, Twilight is bad, but people were too mean to it, or Riverdale is bad, but it's fun, or insert whatever girly little thing I like is bad, but blah, blah, blah. All I hear is bad. All I hear is that all of those people who think that the thing I like and relate to is worthless, all of those people who think that the art that speaks to me is making the word worse, All the people who think that the thing that I had a profound art experience with shouldn't exist. Let's be honest. All the people who think that teenage girls shouldn't exist. Well, they're technically correct, actually. They may be being a bit mean, but they looked at the evidence and came to the correct conclusion. It is bad. It is not worth much. And you know what? I don't buy it. You know, I may be a bit biased, but personally, I think I have pretty good taste. I think that if I find something beautiful, then there's a reason behind it, and that reason is good and worthy. And I want to talk to people who feel similarly. I want to create a community that explores the actual reasons that these things are so resonant without irony, shame, or apology. So if you think that the things that I like are bad, if you think that Riverdale is a failure, then I don't need you to explain why it's okay to like it. I don't need you on my side. I don't need your pity. But if you like it, really like it, if it moves your soul, if the characters live in your heart, if you cried during the next to normal episode like I did, then don't call it bad. If you had a beautiful art experience with something, then you should honor that. Because I think that that thing inside of you that loves Riverdale, that thing inside of you that loves, I think that thing is beautiful, and it deserves to be referred to with language that reflects that. Finally, I propose that it's time that all of us stop calling Twilight bad. Are there bad things about it? Sure. Yeah, it's worth talking about. Is it a perfect masterpiece that should be taught in schools? Also, yes, but that is not the point. We have hated Twilight passionately for over a decade, and we were really good at it. Then we moved on to a more measured response where we acknowledged the faults and tried to understand how it got quite so big. But there was never a time to just unabashedly love Twilight. As a result, we have exhaustively dissected every negative thing about it in fine detail. There's just nothing new or interesting to add to that conversation. But I think we've only scratched the surface at unpacking how subversively wonderful the series really is. And I think the more we dig into that, the more beauty we can create. I'll start. On my channel, I have released 2 videos, each describing something about Twilight that I find beautiful. And to be clear, these are not defense videos. I am done defending the things that I love. I am done censoring other people's hate in my love. If anything, these are my Twilight offense videos. I hope you'll watch.
Be gone from my temple, or I will smite thee. For I am Cheryl Blossom, Queen of the Bees.
Why is quality going down? That is literally the funniest line I've ever heard in my life. Hey, thank you so very kindly for watching my video. It was a lot of work to make, so if you liked it and want me to make more content like this, please like, comment, subscribe, whatever. And also come back next week for a video explaining how High School Musical is the best film trilogy of all time.
So do you think it's better than the Godfather trilogy?
Thank you so very kindly for asking, Maya Hawk. Yes, 100% yes.
Have you seen The Godfather?
No.